Stop explaining yourself to demons in people. God told you to walk away. Some of you are exhausted not because you're doing too much, but because you're explaining too much. You're not tired from the journey. You're tired from trying to justify why you're on it. You keep opening your mouth to defend what God told you in private to people who don't carry His Spirit. And some of them don't even hide the fact that they're against everything you're building. They smile at your progress while silently hoping for your downfall. They question your motives, twist your words, and make you feel like you have to shrink your obedience just to maintain peace. But let me say this clearly. God did not call you to explain yourself to demons hiding inside people. You don't owe clarity to spirits that only came to confuse. You don't owe peace to agents of chaos. You don't owe softness to voices sent to tear you apart. There are times when the spiritual attack doesn't look like a demon with horns. It looks like a person with a familiar face, speaking with persuasive words, cloaked in concern, but powered by the enemy's agenda. And if you don't recognize it, you'll spend all your energy trying to fix what was never your job to fix. You'll keep trying to win over people whose hearts are already hardened by jealousy, bitterness, or bondage. And worse, you'll keep delaying your own assignment while waiting for them to finally understand you. But let's be real. They don't want to understand. They want to distract. They want to derail. And if they can't destroy you, they'll settle for confusing you just enough to slow you down. That's why God is calling His people in this season to wake up, discern what's really going on, and stop wasting oil trying to explain divine instruction to demonic opposition. If Jesus Himself didn't stop to explain His identity to the Pharisees, what makes you think you're supposed to keep justifying your calling to people who've already made up their minds about you? Some spirits don't want an answer. They want access. And every time you try to explain yourself to someone who's not listening with the Spirit, you hand over access to your peace, your clarity, and your confidence. This message is for the weary warrior, the one who's tired of being misunderstood, misjudged, and manipulated. God sees you, and He's not asking you to argue, beg, or defend anymore. He's asking you to stand, to trust, and to obey. Not everyone deserves an explanation, especially not demons dressed in dialogue. Let's talk about what God actually says to do instead. Number 1, recognizing the spirit behind the person. Some conversations you've had lately left you more drained than edified. Not because the topic was difficult, but because the spirit behind the person wasn't right. And deep down you knew it. You felt the subtle shift in the atmosphere when they walked in the room. You sensed the tension that had no name. You picked up on the undercurrent of envy behind their compliments, the passive aggressiveness behind their concern, the manipulation tucked behind their advice. This is where spiritual discernment becomes essential. Not everything is as it appears. Some people are not just having a bad day. They're carrying a spirit that's on assignment to get close enough to your soul to sow confusion, fear, or offense. And if you keep engaging on the surface trying to fix it with logic or love alone, you'll miss what's really at play. Jesus modeled this perfectly in Matthew 16. When Peter, someone He deeply loved, tried to talk him out of going to the cross, Jesus didn't respond to Peter as a man. He responded to the Spirit speaking through him. "Get thee behind me, Satan." That wasn't an insult to Peter. It was an immediate recognition of spiritual interference. Peter didn't become evil in that moment, but in his human compassion, he became a vessel for a demonic agenda that wanted to stop Jesus from fulfilling His purpose. The enemy can use those closest to us to whisper doubt, delay, or disobedience into our hearts if we're not spiritually awake. You're not crazy for sensing something is off. You're not judgmental for keeping your distance. When your spirit picks up what your eyes can't see, trust it. That's the Holy Spirit nudging you to pray before you speak, to pause before you explain, and to discern before you engage. Some people aren't just challenging your ideas, they're attacking your identity, and the spirit behind them knows exactly what it's doing. When you start recognizing that you're not wrestling with flesh and blood but with spiritual forces in unseen places, You begin to realize that not every person is sent by God, even if they carry a Bible. Some are sent to detour, delay, and distract. And the quicker you discern the source, the less energy you waste explaining yourself to it. Number 2. Why you feel the urge to explain yourself. Let's be honest. Explaining yourself feels like safety. It's our attempt to maintain peace, preserve relationships, or clear up misunderstandings. We don't want to be seen as arrogant, harsh, or unloving. So we try to soften the truth, defend our decisions, and keep everyone comfortable, even when we're not. But here's the trap. That desire to explain is often rooted in a deeper desire to be understood. And while that might seem harmless, it becomes a spiritual vulnerability when the people you're trying to be understood by don't carry the Spirit of God. You end up compromising divine obedience in an attempt to gain human approval. The Apostle Paul addressed this tension in Galatians 1:10 when he wrote, "Am I now trying to win the approval of men or of God? Or am I trying to please men? If I were still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ." That verse hits hard because it confronts the idol of approval, an idol that's quietly formed every time we make someone else's opinion more important than God's instruction. You keep thinking, if they just heard my heart, they'd understand. If I explained it differently, maybe they'd stop judging me. But here's the reality. Some people aren't misunderstanding you. They're resisting you because your obedience reminds them of their disobedience. Your calling shines light on their compromise, and no amount of explanation will fix a heart that doesn't want the truth. When you're called, you'll be misunderstood. It's not a maybe, it's a guarantee. Even Jesus was misunderstood. His silence was misinterpreted. His miracles were questioned. His motives were twisted. Yet he rarely explained himself. Why? Because he knew his audience wasn't the crowd. It was the Father. The constant urge to explain comes from a place of fear of being rejected, judged, or abandoned. But walking with God means being willing to disappoint people in order to obey Him. And sometimes that obedience looks like letting people think what they want while you move forward anyway. And sometimes that obedience looks like letting people think what they want while you move forward. You don't owe an explanation for every boundary, every decision, or every shift in your life. Especially when it's God-led. You owe Him your yes. That's it. Some of you are explaining too much because you still want to be liked. But God didn't anoint you to be liked. He anointed you to be set apart. And set apart people walk roads that others won't understand. That's not rejection, it's redirection. Let them misunderstand you. Let them talk. Let them assume. If your obedience offends their comfort, so be it. You were never called to keep the peace by sacrificing your purpose. Number 3. Demonic distraction. The strategy of the enemy. The enemy doesn't always come with horns, chaos, or destruction. Sometimes he shows up with questions. Are you sure you heard from God? Is that really what you're supposed to do? Why are you being so harsh, so distant, so spiritual all of a sudden? Distraction is one of the enemy's most effective tools because it doesn't always look like evil. It often looks like concern. It wears the disguise of just wanting to understand, but the real motive is to delay you, to make you second-guess what God made clear, to tie you up in emotional arguments, so you're too tired to walk in your anointing. It happened to Nehemiah. God gave him an assignment: rebuild the wall. It was bold, public, and opposed by many. His enemies, Sanballat and Tobiah, didn't come at him with swords. They came with conversation. Repeatedly, they sent messengers asking him to come down and meet. But Nehemiah responded with power and clarity in Nehemiah 6:3, "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down." That's it. No long explanation. No drawn-out defense. Just, I can't come down. Some of you need to make that your mantra in this season. I can't come down to explain why I set boundaries. I can't come down to justify why I walked away from dysfunction. I can't come down to debate what God already settled in my spirit. Because here's the truth. Every time you stop to explain yourself to someone who's been sent to confuse you, you pause the assignment God gave you. The enemy doesn't have to destroy your calling if he can just distract you from it. The devil knows how to use people as spiritual speed bumps, well-placed conversations, emotional triggers, or old wounds packaged as unfinished business. But when you're in a Nehemiah season building, focused, set apart, you can't afford to give your attention to battles God never told you to fight. It's not pride, it's protection. You're protecting your energy, your clarity, your purpose. The enemy would love for you to be tangled up in drama, explaining your every move, defending your every decision. But God is calling you to move in silence and authority. Let the distractors talk. Let the enemy send his messengers. You just keep building, because you're doing a great work, and you cannot come down. Number 4. Jesus never explained himself to demons. One of the most powerful things about Jesus wasn't just his miracles, it was his silence. The restraint he walked in was just as holy as the words he spoke, and time after time we see Jesus refuse to explain himself, especially when he recognized the spirit behind the question. In Luke 4, Jesus is confronted by a man possessed by a demon. The spirit cries out, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." And what does Jesus do? He doesn't thank the demon for recognizing him. He doesn't clarify his mission or defend his identity. He rebukes it and tells it to be silent. That's authority. And you, believer, carry that same authority. You don't have to defend your calling to voices that were never meant to understand it. Jesus didn't explain himself to demons because he knew something we often forget. You don't argue with opposition sent to kill your purpose. You cast it out. When the Pharisees questioned his authority, demanded signs, and accused him of blasphemy, Jesus often answered with parables or silence, not because he was being rude, but because he discerned that their hearts were hardened, and no explanation, no miracle, no carefully worded answer was going to change that. That's a word for you today. Some people's minds are already made up about you. Stop wasting oil trying to change them. Jesus wasn't moved by the approval of man. He was anchored in the will of the Father, and that anchoring gave him freedom from the need to explain. You too can be free from over-explaining to people who are spiritually blind, free from trying to change minds that are committed to misunderstanding you, free from thinking you're being unloving for not answering every question. The truth is, when demons are speaking through people, they don't want truth. They want access. They want an opening, an emotional doorway, a crack in your confidence. And the more you talk, the more ground you give them. Some of the longest, most exhausting conversations you've had weren't conversations at all. They were spiritual battles, and you walked away wondering, why do I feel so drained? Because you weren't just talking to a person, you were wrestling with a spirit. Next time, take the authority God has given you. You don't have to be rude. You don't even have to raise your voice. You just have to recognize, this is not my assignment. This is not a conversation I owe. This is not something Jesus would explain himself out of, and neither will I. Number 5, what God says to do instead. When God sees you exhausting yourself, trying to defend what he told you in private, he's not impressed. He's grieved, because every time you bend toward the pressure of people's opinions, you're turning your ear away from his voice. God doesn't just call you out of bondage, he calls you into obedience. And obedience rarely makes sense to everyone else. So what does God actually say to do instead of explaining yourself to those who carry no spiritual authority over your life? He says, trust me, walk forward, keep your eyes on me. Proverbs 3:5-6 says it clearly. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. That's not poetic advice. It's a divine strategy. Because when you trust God fully, you stop needing others to understand what he's doing in you. You stop shrinking your obedience just to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. And let's not forget, Isaiah 55:8-9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Which means some of your moves will look off to people who are operating in a carnal mindset. That's why you can't pause your purpose every time someone raises an eyebrow or doesn't feel peace about your decision. God didn't ask them. He told you. Here's the truth. When God gives you instruction, your job is to obey it, not explain it. Because while you're trying to help people see your heart, God is trying to develop your faith. And faith doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in the tension of obeying before it makes sense, before it's popular, before it's applauded. When Mary was told she would carry the Messiah, she didn't send out an announcement or try to convince the town she was holy. She simply said, "Be it unto me according to your word," and that was enough. It still is. God is raising up a people who are more committed to obeying than explaining. People who will say yes in the dark, who will walk away without closure, who will move when the Spirit says move, even when it makes them look foolish to others. Because the truth is, it only looks foolish until the fruit shows up, and it always does. So what should you do instead of explaining? Trust, obey, move, and let the clarity come in God's timing, not through your efforts to convince those who were never meant to see it in the first place. Number 6, setting boundaries with boldness and grace. At some point, you have to stop asking for permission to protect your peace. There comes a moment when God doesn't just call you to move forward. He calls you to set up boundaries behind you, because where He's taking you, not everyone can follow, not everyone should, and that's not unloving, it's holy. Too many believers are drained, not because they're under attack, but because they've left every door open. People come and go in their lives, speak what they want, demand access, drain time, question purpose, and all in the name of being loving or Christ-like. But Jesus didn't give everyone the same access. He had the 12, the 3, and even moments when He withdrew completely to be alone with the Father. If Jesus Himself walked in divine boundaries, why are we so afraid to? Boundaries are not rejection. They are protection. You're not being mean when you limit access. You're being obedient to the Spirit that's trying to preserve your energy, your focus, and your clarity. Matthew 10:14 gives us permission we don't talk about enough. Jesus said, "If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet." Do you hear that? Walk away. Don't argue. Don't explain. Shake it off. Some of you are stuck because you refuse to dust off your feet. You keep going back to conversations, hoping they'll understand this time. You keep reopening doors God already shut, and every time you walk away more confused, more drained, more insecure. God is saying, that's not your assignment anymore. Set the boundary, protect the oil. Boundaries don't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop sacrificing your mental, emotional, and spiritual health for people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It means you stop negotiating your peace for the sake of appearances. Even Paul and Barnabas, two anointed men of God, had to part ways, and it wasn't demonic, it was divine. Because sometimes the call is too heavy to carry with people who are going in a different direction. It's not a betrayal. It's a boundary, and boundaries don't need an explanation. They need consistency. You don't have to give a speech. You just need to obey. So in this season, set the boundary with grace, with love, but with boldness. You don't owe everyone access. You owe God your yes, and sometimes your yes to Him is a no to them. Number 7, let your fruit speak for you. There comes a point in every believer's walk where you stop trying to prove yourself and just let your fruit speak. Because at the end of the day, people can argue your words, misunderstand your decisions, twist your intentions, but they can't argue with results. They can't deny fruit. Jesus said it plainly in Matthew 7:16. You will know them by their fruit, not by their explanations, not by their apologies, not by their ability to win debates, by their fruit. That means what grows from your life, your peace, your progress, your maturity, your impact, will always be louder than your explanations. You don't have to convince anyone that you're walking with God. You don't have to convince them you're in purpose. You don't have to argue about what they think your motives are. Just keep obeying. Just keep planting. Just keep watering. In due time, the harvest will come. And when it does, it will speak for you in ways your words never could. The people who criticized Noah while he was building were the same people banging on the ark when the rain started falling. But Noah didn't argue while he built. He didn't explain the forecast. He didn't hold town hall meetings to get people on board. He just followed God, and the fruit, salvation, protection, preservation spoke for him. You have to be willing to look crazy while building something they don't understand. You have to be okay with silence while you sow. And you have to trust that God will vindicate you, not with claps from the crowd, but with evidence of His hand on your life. Some of you are entering a season where God is shifting you from explanation to demonstration, where your growth, your favor, your discernment, your elevation, none of it will need a caption. It will be seen, and the people who used to question you will have to wrestle with the truth that God was in it all along. So stop talking, stop defending, stop trying to win people over who were never assigned to your field. Just keep planting seeds of obedience, keep watering them with prayer, keep walking in integrity, and let your life speak. Because when your fruit starts showing, even your enemies will have to admit God was with you. Conclusion: stop explaining and start obeying. Let's make it plain. You don't owe an explanation to demons hiding in people. You don't owe it to the ones who gossip behind your back and smile to your face. You don't owe it to the ones who question your calling, but never prayed for your process. You don't owe it to family members who mock your boundaries or friends who left when you got serious about God. This isn't the season for justification. It's the season for separation. God is calling you higher, and higher places come with thinner air, less noise, fewer people, and more of Him. You've spent enough time explaining, enough time defending, enough time asking for understanding from people who are spiritually blind. It's time to shake the dust, silence the need to be liked, and obey God without apology. Because here's the truth: trying to explain spiritual things to carnal minds will always leave you frustrated. You're not supposed to convert them with conversation. You're supposed to confound them with fruit. You're supposed to walk in such peace, such purpose, such undeniable evidence of God's hand on your life, that even your critics start asking, who is their God? So this is your permission slip to stop explaining. Stop lowering your voice to be less offensive. Stop watering down your calling to be more palatable. Stop negotiating your obedience to avoid conflict. If they're not sent by God, their approval is irrelevant. God is calling you to stand, to build, to speak only when He says speak, and to trust that your silence, your obedience, and your fruit will echo louder than any defense ever could. This is the season where your confidence doesn't come from how well you're understood. It comes from how closely you're walking with the one who understands everything. So stand tall, set the boundary, move in purpose, keep building, and let the demons wonder why they can't access you anymore. Let the people used by the enemy be confused by your peace. Let your life say everything your mouth no longer needs to. God never asked you to explain. He asked you to obey. Now go do it.